welcome to Tree Talk for July 2018. I'm Duane Rigsby. I got Dave Apsley here as usual. Dave, looks like we've got a bunch of trees in front of us here. Yep. What are we doing here?
We're going to talk a little bit about tree ID.
Tree identification. Wow. Now, there looks like there's lots of stuff laying here, but I tell you what, it looks awful hard for me to tell you other than it's a green leaf. So what's the first thing we need to do to get started?
Well, to start with tree ID, it's really a process of elimination. So if you just look at trees and try to memorize them based on sight, it gets pretty complicated. So you got to work yourself through a process.
Right.
And the first question, you ask yourself a series of questions and you just kind of head down a path until you narrow it down. So that's kind of what I want to start with.
About the only thing I can tell you about different trees is I can tell you it's a pine tree or a leaf type tree.
Okay.
Is that something we start with?
So that's one of the first splits. In Ohio, most of our trees are what we call broadleaf deciduous trees. They'll lose their leaves in the fall and they'll be bare through the winter. But we've got a few pines.
Okay.
And there's a whole group of trees called conifers, and pines are in that group.
In that group, okay.
So not all conifers are pines, but this example of a pine right here.
And we've got a camera we're going to zoom in on here so you can see what Dave's talking about.
And the group is conifers, so they produce cones. So you can see a cone on this one. And the pines all have needles in groups, in bundles or bunches. And so this one, the needles are always in twos. If I can get it on the screen there. See the needle there? They're in pairs or twos.
Yep.
So when we identify the pines, we just look at the numbers of the needles in those bundles or bunches, and then how long the needles are. And we can usually separate our pines out pretty quickly.
Okay.
But of our well over 100 trees that are native to Ohio, probably well less than 5% of them are pine or conifers. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on those.
Okay.
This is our probably one of our most common pines out there. It's called Virginia pine. A lot of locals call it scrub pine.
Okay.
But you'll find whole areas covered with Virginia pine. And most of the time when we got a lot of Virginia pine around, it's an area that was probably an ag field, pretty poor soils. It was farmed really heavily, and then Virginia pine is the one that'll come in.
Okay.
So that's about all we're going to do, talking about pines and conifers. There's a bunch of other conifers like hemlock and spruce and fir and stuff, but
now when I think of a pine tree, a lot of people will think of a Christmas tree. What type of a tree is that?
Christmas trees can be pines, and historically a lot of the Christmas trees were pine. They used a lot of Scotch pine, some white pine. Seems to be more of a shift to the single-needled conifers like the firs.
Okay.
There aren't really any native firs to Ohio, but they're planting quite a few firs now in Ohio.
Okay. All right. So we got a lot of leaves here.
Yeah.
So how do we get started on leaves?
So once you decide it's not a conifer, then you're going to make some other decisions.
Okay.
And one of the things I like to do, and this is hard for people to see, but it's how the leaves are attached to the twig.
To the stem in the middle.
Yeah, so the twig's running down the middle. And if you see these leaves on this one, they're not paired up, they alternate sides.
Right. They're not straight across from each other.
They're not straight across from each other, they alternate sides. So we call this alternate, as opposed to something that is opposite where they're paired and straight across from each other.
Okay.
So like that. See these two leaves are paired with each other. That's what we call opposite.
They're almost attached straight across, yes.
The third option is whorled, where you'll actually have a third one attached, and there are very few that do that.
Okay.
That's called, the catalpa is about the only thing that does that in Ohio.
Okay.
And it's not actually native to Ohio. So what we always like to do, the first question is, are the leaves opposite one another? Are they alternate from one another?
Opposite or alternate? Okay.
That's probably the first thing that people need to look for. And when you decide it's opposite, paired like that, we got a little trick to help you remember that. Do you remember that from your college days?
Oh, that's been a long time, Dave. I'll go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
Mad Buck.
Mad Buck.
Remember Mad Buck.
Okay.
The M in Mad stands for this one.
Okay.
It's a maple.
Yep.
The A in Mad
yes.
stands for this one. See, those are paired, but these are a different kind of leaf. Those are compound leaves. This is ash.
Right, but they're still across from each other.
They're still paired. The leaves are across from each other. See, Mad. The other one, the D.
The D
is this guy, or gal. That's a dogwood.
Dogwood, they're straight across
So
from
there's
each
your
other.
mad. You got the maple ash dogwood.
Yep.
And then for the Ohio State fans, you got this one.
Ah,
Those are paired up,
yep.
and the leaves are what we call a compound leaf, and it's hard to get this one. I got too much stuff in the way here. But this one will have 5, sometimes 7 leaflets
Right.
that are attached at that same spot.
And that's
So
the Buckeye.
That's the Buckeye. So remember Mad Buck. So when you look at it, if leaves are paired up with each other, just
It could
remember
only
Mad
be
Buck.
those trees.
Of the
mainly.
native ones, yeah,
Native.
those are
Yeah.
99% of the time it's going to be those trees.
99%. Yep. Gotcha.
So there's your Ohio buck. I actually stole that from the landscape out here and sampled that.
Yep. Yep.
We've actually got 2 native buckeyes in Ohio. I don't know if anybody knew that or not, but this is the one that grows up in the northern part of the state. You'll find it down here in the southern part along the rivers. But we've got another one. If you'll notice, this fruit is covered up with these bumpy
It's really,
spiny.
looks real bumpy thing, yeah. Yeah, there's one that I'm used to seeing that's smooth.
And this is the other one. This is yellow buckeye, which is actually probably more common in the southern part of the state, but it has more of a smooth husk fruit. But it'll again have these leaves that have the 5 leaflets,
Okay. Yep.
compound leaves.
Gotcha.
So the other thing, I wasn't going to mention this, but the other way to tell the Ohio buckeye is if you scratch the twig and give it a good whiff. Take a smell of that.
Yeah.
Kind of like a skunk.
Yeah, kind of
The
stinky.
Ohio buckeye is a little bit
Yeah.
stinky too.
Yeah.
So the first thing you want to ask yourself is the leaves are paired up,
Paired or opposite?
or alternate.
Yeah.
Alternate means they alternate when they're paired, they're opposite.
Okay.
The next thing you ask yourself is the leaf. Oh, this is probably a better one. Is the leaf compound? So that's all one leaf. And see how that leaf, that buckeye leaf, has 5 leaflets.
5, 5 on it.
Or is the leaf simple,
One single leaf like that.
like a leaf blade like this one?
Okay.
So those are the other things you want to look for, and the keys will work you through it. We actually have an Ohio State key that I'll show you here in a little bit.
Okay.
But those are the next questions you ask. Okay, if it's opposite or alternate, and then is it compound or simple?
Okay.
And then if it's compound, we have some different choices. There's your leaf on the Buckeye. It's a lot of stuff to throw out in 30-minute deal. But there's a different type of a compound leaf. That's our ash leaf. And they look kind of like a feather. They have a central stem on them and then
Yeah.
leaflets on both sides. So we call that pinnate leaf compound. Like pinna means feather in Latin.
Okay.
And this one's palmate leaf compound, like the palm of your hand.
Gotcha.
If I can get it in there.
Yep.
So all the leaflets attach in one spot. So those are other questions that you're going to ask yourself, and then you're going to work your way through a key. And I'm not sure, I think I can lay this under here. There's a key that we developed at Ohio State.
The other way.
Upside
There you
down.
go.
We developed at Ohio State as kind of a teaching tool to help people identify trees. And it's by no means a totally comprehensive book, but it's a key that just kind of helps you through the process.
It gets you through the general
So
trees.
you start out just asking the questions. Is it a conifer or is it a hardwood? Deciduous tree. Is it compound, or I'm sorry, is it opposite or alternate?
Alternate.
And then is it compound or simple? And you just work your way through that, and that's
And then
how
at the
you,
end it tells you what that is, if it should be.
yeah,
Okay.
so it works your way.
So if it's a simple leaf, Dave, what's our choices from there?
So with simple, this one's going to be pretty hard to see, but I've got that one. Here's another one. Trying to find one without. So what we look at with simple is the shape.
Okay. So and the shape, meaning the whole shape of the leaf, not just the stem.
The shape
Or-
of the leaf.
Okay, only
So
the leaf.
With probably one of the harder things is where's the leaf start and where's the twig, where's the twig stop and the leaf start. But
Yeah.
usually there's a color change there, and usually right where the leaf attaches, there's a bud, a swollen spot on the twig.
Right.
So that's, slide these out of the way. So from the bud right there, that swollen spot to the tip is the leaf. And then we start looking at different shapes. Like this is a pretty classic shape. Most people recognize it as one of our oaks.
Oak tree of some sort.
So it has lobing. We've got some with just a smooth edge and no teeth, like this little guy. That's
Okay.
actually a persimmon.
Okay.
And then others have teeth along the edges. So those are next questions. It's going to say, okay, if it's a simple leaf, does it have teeth on the edge? Does it have a smooth edge? Does it have these lobes, like think of your earlobes?
Right.
So those are questions that you're going to ask yourself as you work through that process.
So what if we have lobes? And I know there's a variety of oak trees. Does your guide, Dave, get you down beyond that, or does it just say it's an oak tree?
It'll take you to the actual type of oak.
Okay.
The guide that we've got has got 88 different trees in it, so it'll give you a variety. So it'll help you. The next question with the oaks is, what's different about those two?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I see the lobes are nice and big and smooth. The other ones are nice and pointy.
Yeah, these are more pointed,
Yeah.
and we probably can't see it with this camera, but these will actually have little bristles or hairs on the tips.
Yeah.
So this is a whole group of oaks called the red oak group, and this is a whole group of oaks called the white oak group. And then it'll start asking more questions, like, okay, how deep are these, what we call sinuses between the lobes? How deeply cut are they? And what's the shape of that leaf? And then it might ask you about the acorn or the bark about it too. So, but yeah, we can, I don't know how many oaks are in the book, I can't remember, but it's probably at least a dozen in there. You can separate your oaks out too.
Okay. So if it's, so we've decided that we've got down to an oak family now. If it has those lobes, there's no other tree that really has lobes to speak of.
Well, they're just different types of lobes.
Yeah.
So here's a different one that has some lobes.
Okay.
It's a different shape.
Yep. And that's a great big old leaf.
That's a big leaf.
Usually you see them as a big old leaf.
And I should have put something in here for scale. Well, that's probably not going to work out, but it's a big leaf. This one's unusual. It's the only leaf I can think of that doesn't have a point at the tip.
Oh.
Most trees have a point at the very tip.
Yeah.
That one has more of a notch or a flat across. This is called Tulip Tree or yellow poplar tree.
Yep.
And some people say it's gets its name because that kind of looks like a tulip from the side.
Yeah.
But it also has a big tulip-looking flower. It's kind of green and orange and yellow. It's very unusual.
Yeah.
But that's tulip tree, another pretty common native.
Now you said yellow poplar as well. Now, is there other poplar trees, or should we say there's only that yellow poplar native?
So poplar is a confusing term.
Yes.
We got a lot of common names that may or may not make a lot of sense botanically.
Yep.
But really the poplar families are things like aspen.
Okay.
So the cottonwoods and aspens are probably closer to being a poplar. So.
Then yeah.
But we do have some native aspens. The big tooth aspen's pretty common down here in southern Ohio.
Okay.
And then a real close relative is the cottonwood, eastern cottonwood with kind of that triangle-shaped leaf.
Okay. Okay. So we've got two trees that have big lobes. We've got oaks, and we have this
we got
poplar
more than
or
two
tulip. Well, I mean, what we've covered so far.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, what else do we have something else with us, Dave?
We've got lots of samples here. This one might be of interest to folks. It's kind of unusual.
Now, this one has multiple.
Yeah, so
some round ones, some looks
on
like
the
a
same
glove.
tree, you can have 3 different leaf shapes, and I don't know if I'll be able to find the mitten on here or not. There's a littler one
There's a
that's a
small
mitten.
mitten. Yeah.
I keep putting them upside down. Sorry about that. But yeah, there's 3 different shapes on this same tree, which makes it very unusual. And that's called the sassafras.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite trees. Got a really wonderful odor. If you crush that leaf up, it's got kind of a lemony odor. Another great way to tell this thing in the winter is this twig. If you look at that twig, it stays green all winter. Even this twig back here is last year's growth.
Yeah.
And it's still very green, and you'll find green way
All
back
way
on
back
it.
in there, yeah.
So if you scratch that and smell it and you see that green twig, that's a pretty good
It has a very
indicator.
distinctive odor to it.
Really.
That is pleasant.
Very pleasant.
Opposed to the Buckeye tree.
Very pleasant. Smells like some people say it smells like pledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lemon pledge. So what else do we have to show you?
So yeah. So we have more.
We went and collected all kinds of samples this morning.
Gotcha.
I mentioned the 2 types of compound leaves. The Buckeye leaf has the 5 leaves, what we call palmate, like that. Here's another unusual one that actually, that whole thing is 1 leaf.
That's 1 leaf.
That's 1 leaf.
Wow.
So the bud would have been way back here where it attached to the twig, and then it branches.
It's branches. See, I think a lot of people would misunderstand stand at and say only that little branches, the little tiny leaves
this
on
thing
it,
here.
instead of saying that's the whole thing is the
And to
leaf.
make things even more complicated,
Ooh.
those came off the same tree.
Wow, that looks different, completely
That's
different.
interesting, isn't it? That's honey locust. And the sample I got was out of the yard here. Normally honey locust has nice big sharp thorns all over it.
Yeah.
This one's in the landscape, and they've actually bred that characteristic out of them. But this is called a bipinnate or twice compound leaf. And very few, if you find that, there are very few that actually do that. This honey locust will do that. There's a tree that's native a little bit to our west called Kentucky coffee tree, and it can have these massive leaves that are about this long that branch, hundreds of leaflets. And then there's one with spines all over it. You'll find up in the Hocking Hills occasionally called Devil's Walking Stick that'll do that.
Ooh,
but if you find it with branched compound leaves like that, then it's going to really help narrow it down.
Okay. So with this, so when you just said this is a locust tree, again, there's multiple types of locust trees.
So this is,
and I see them always in fence posts and things like that.
So this is honey locust. It's got the big long thorns that branch. The other one is probably more common that you'll see in the spring with the white flowers all over it.
Yeah, there you go.
That's black locust.
Black locust.
And they're very, very fragrant, but it has thorns that are in pairs. So they're doubled up and they're right on the twig.
Okay.
So that's black locust.
Okay.
Let me see what else I can find here. A couple other ones that might be of interest, and this is going to be a monster to look at because this leaf, I got it kind of out of a shady spot.
Yeah, that is big leaves.
But this is, well, we're probably not going to make it happen.
We can get part of it in there.
That's all one big leaf, but it only has 5 leaflets. That's a hickory. And you'll notice at the tip, the hickories, usually the big leaves at the very tip are bigger than those that are further back in here.
Okay.
So that's a hickory.
Yeah. Now hickory, again, I'm going to just keep asking questions. There's varieties of hickory.
Yep.
So is there one kind that we see more native?
Well, the
to
one
us, or
that
should
most
we-
people recognize is probably this one. And they recognize it by its bark.
Yep.
And its name is great because it helps you remember it. It's shagbark.
Shaggy, yeah. It
So
looks
if it's
real-
got a real shaggy bark on it, chances are it's shagbark.
Yep.
But there is a cousin called shellbark that you'll
Yeah.
find down in the bottoms by the creeks that get massive, and they actually have the big fruit. They actually call them kingnut.
Oh,
hickory.
yeah, that's what I would, yeah.
And those are probably the ones that are the best to eat because they're big enough you can get a lot of fruit out of them.
Yeah.
But the hickories, the way we separate them is how many leaflets do they have. The shagbarks usually have 5, like this one.
Okay.
And then we've got others, like the kingnut will have 7 to 9 leaflets.
Okay.
We've got one that's called, I'm drawing about blank, bitternut hickory, which has 7 to 11. So we just look at the numbers of leaflets, we look at the bark, and then the fruit of the hickory nut, how thick that husk is, will help us identify our hickories and separate them out.
Okay.
And then one of the cousins to hickory is way over here. I'm going to get up and hopefully not trip over anything. It has even a neater leaf. It's a big, long leaf with lots of leaflets. And that's black walnut.
Now again, this is one leaf, even though it's the whole looking stem, right?
Yeah, so let's pull
Pulling
this.
off one little individual leaf. There you go.
Let's
yeah.
put that in there. And you
So
can
the
see
stem-
there's the stem or the twig. And there's a big, and the lighting's just not quite right. If I turn it a little bit, there's the bud right there. And everything from the bud out is a leaf. So
It's
this whole
considered a
thing from here out is all one big leaf.
That's considered a leaf, yeah.
And with the walnuts, they'll be into the teens, the number of leaflets.
Bunches.
Usually paired on the sides, and then on the very tip, they'll have one leaflet at the tip. This one's actually lost its leaf at the tip.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon for black walnut. Actually, there's a cousin of white walnut that'll keep that tip. So that's another way we help separate them.
Okay.
But again, if you look at that, we run it. Go back to review a little bit. See how these leaves are alternating sides?
Alternate, yeah.
So that is the black walnut.
Okay.
Got a great smell too when you handle it.
Yeah.
You really get
Yeah.
the odor
Walnut
from the walnut.
Now, is walnut starting to be a little scarce, or Now, it's the ash tree, right, that has the problem that you really can't find anything. Find it there.
So ash is becoming a problem because the emerald ash borer. It's a non-native insect. It's found its way into Ohio back in like '02.
Okay.
Since then, it's spread throughout almost all of Ohio, pretty much all of Ohio, and it's in 30-some states now. So it's just exploded. It's that insect that's native to Asia. And there are a few trees that seem to be surviving it, but for the most part, most of them are dying. They bore right under the bark and eventually kill the tree.
Gotcha. Wow. But the walnut tree is probably one of our most valuable trees?
Black walnut wood is probably the most valuable wood historically. There'll be some the prices are higher at times just because of demand, but walnut historically over the long haul has been one of the most valuable, especially if you've got good quality walnut.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got probably another six or so minutes, Dave. Is there what other path should we follow here to identify trees? We've got the we did the single leaf. What is there any single leaf, not the great big ones?
So the simple leaf ones, again, probably the best thing to do is just work your way through the key. Here's one, a little different one. I'm going to sneak through and grab it. That is actually native to parts of Ohio, but doesn't get much further north than where we are here in Piketon. Looks a lot like a maple leaf, kind of, but the lobing's a little different.
It's huge.
But again, if you look, they're not paired.
Right.
Get it on the screen. So they alternate sides. So this is sweet gum, actually.
Yep.
And back to the mad buck, remember, if they're paired, it's got to be a maple ash, dogwood, or buckeye. But if they're not paired, all bets are off. There's lots of different ones, and you got to work your way through that key and ask, does the leaf have lobes? This one actually has lobes. Does it have teeth on the edge?
And now that one has teeth on the edge, right?
It does, yeah.
So we see little jagged spots along it to make it look like a saw blade or something, right?
Yeah, and it even gets into those keys. They'll ask, are those teeth more rounded? Are they sharp pointed?
Okay.
We call that serration. Think of a serrated knife.
Okay.
And then some of the teeth, some of the leaves, like our elms, have teeth with little teeth on them.
Oh.
So they're what we call doubly serrate.
Okay.
So those are the things. It's a lot of terminology, a lot of stuff we're throwing at you, but you gotta, more than anything, look at the details.
Yeah.
And then work your way through that process. Like I said, we have the key that we developed at Ohio State. There's a wonderful source online too. Virginia Tech has an online site to identify, and it works your way through it, and I highly recommend it. If you just go type in Virginia Tech and tree identification in a Google search, you'll find that.
Okay.
But they have wonderful images, so when you key through it, it's really cool. They'll have a list, and you'll say you're in Ohio, so they'll give you the whole list of Ohio trees.
Right.
And then when we say, is it a conifer or a broadleaf, that list, if you say broadleaf, it gets a little shorter.
It just keeps shrinking.
If you say opposite, it gets shorter, and then you can see that list get narrower, and you can click on them and start looking at them.
Okay.
And so that's a great way to.
And it gives you photos of that leaf. Now we've talked about leaves here, Dave. What if it's in the fall or wintertime when we don't have leaves?
Well, I can tell.
Maybe that'll be another.
That's a whole nother section.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But we can identify them by just bark and buds and things like that, right?
Right. As a forester, we'd have a pretty short seasonal job if we couldn't identify trees all year round.
Yeah. Right.
So we learned to identify trees by not only leaves, but we spent a lot of time looking at twigs and buds.
Yeah.
So we're looking at this twig on this hickory, and you can feel it. It's real fuzzy and hairy.
Yeah.
We're looking at how big the buds are. We're looking at bark. We're looking at fruit. Things like hickory nuts and acorns on the ground will help us separate our oaks.
Yep.
But it's really important to learn those other things.
You're right, because those leaves are only there.
They're only there for the spring through fall.
Yeah.
And what I recommend, starting out, work with leaves.
Yep.
Get really good at learning.
That's probably the easiest way, right out of the gate, if you want to learn some tree identification.
So if you start with the leaves, and then you start looking, okay, I know this is a hickory. Now I'm going to look at that bud. I'm going to look at that twig. I'm going to look at the bark when I'm standing by the tree, and eventually your mind will start making that association.
Put them all together.
It's hard to go out in the woods and just learn bark.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the hardest. So if you learn the leaves and you connect with the bark and the fruit, then over time you'll start picking that up.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend taking the challenge of going out and picking up some leaves and getting yourself either one of our keys or going to Virginia Tech.
Now, your key, Dave. How do I get it? Can I get that? Do I have to pay for it? What's the?
You can and you do. It's available through Ohio State University. I believe it is online at the Woodland Stewards web page as well, the Ohio Woodland Stewards web page. But it's called a leaf identification key for 88 Ohio trees. And again, it's not got lots of pretty pictures. It's a lot of text. And it's got a little table in there that will help you through that process. It'll show you some of the basic terminology. And then it'll just ask you a series of questions. Is it a conifer or is it a broadleaf? If it's a broadleaf, is it alternate? Is it opposite? And then you'll just work your way down that path until you get to the tree that's in it.
Now, do you have an identification like this for wintertime as well?
We do not, but they're out there. They're available. There are other ones. Most of the winter keys get pretty complicated.
Right. Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
We've actually started a project and have a draft of one, but we haven't gotten to the point where it's in the works.
All right. All right. Well, hey, we're running out of time, Dave.
Yep.
So I guess until next time, maybe we'll plan another session of doing some more identification or something else.
Well, and keep an eye out because we do occasionally programs on tree ID. We've actually got one tomorrow, so by the time this airs, it'll be too late. But we'll do an all-day tree session to get you hands-on and work through the key. And we'll do those in the summer and we'll do them in the winter as well. So if you keep an eye on our blog site.
And where is that blog located?
It's u.osu.edu/SE Ohio Woods.
SE Ohio Woods. Okay. Yep. All righty.
It's been a pleasure.
All righty. Thank you. And until next month, we will see everyone later.
Take care.